Hola a todo el mundo y bienvenido a mi canal. Yo me llamo Siri. Soy una abogada afro-latina licenciada practicando la ley criminal, pero como todos ustedes, a mí me fascina cuando estamos hablando de casos de crímenes reales. En este video vamos a seguir hablando de Sean Diddy Combs. Si quieren más video en español, nada más dime allá abajo. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Desiree. I'm a licensed and practicing Afro-Latina criminal attorney who, much like the rest of you, has a severe fascination with true crime cases. Listen, in our last video where we discussed Diddy, we discussed the entire full 5th week of Diddy's trial. If you remember, I told you guys that heading into the 6th week, the 6th week was a holiday week and court would not be in session for this upcoming Thursday. If you don't know what holiday Thursday, June 19th is, you probably should. Regardless, let's carry on and continue on in our discussion of, again, the man, the myth, the mogul, whatever it is y'all want to call him, Sean Diddy Combs. The 24th day of Sean Diddy Combs' trial continued on Monday, June 16th of 2025. If you'll remember, last Friday concluded with the government calling their 30th witness, another one of Diddy's former personal assistants, a man by the name of Jonathan Biddes. And if you'll also remember, Jonathan introduced yet another moniker to Diddy's illicit activities: King Nights. I didn't say this in the last video, but AUSA Marine Comey also informed the court last Friday that the government merely had 5 remaining witnesses. Per the government, the 5 remaining witnesses include 3 summary witnesses, 1 law enforcement witness, and 1 more of Diddy's former personal assistants. But before testimony began on this day, and again, speaking of AUSA Comey, do you remember how she asked the court to get rid of juror number 6 last week? If you'll also remember, Diddy's defense attorney Alexandra Shapiro informed the court on behalf of defense that they felt this was a thinly veiled attempt to rid the panel of a black juror. The court didn't make any decisions at that point. It was merely considering it, but after further consideration, the judge did grant the government's request and removed juror number 6. In its statement, the court said it had noticed prior inconsistencies that this juror made to statements in the court because it reviewed transcripts of what the juror said. The court further continued on that some of those inconsistencies include where the juror lives and with whom. The court continued on in its elaboration and stated that during jury selection, this juror stated that he lived in the Bronx with his fiancée and a child. But based on the inquiry made by the court last week, the court noticed that this juror said that he lived in New Jersey and merely stayed in the Bronx 4 to 5 nights per week. The court further concluded that there was ample evidence that this juror was acting based on a personal agenda and really wanted to remain on that panel. And because of that, the court ultimately excluded him. You know what I find really interesting? That some point over the weekend, because the court had already been considering removing this juror, Diddy's legal team filed a letter with the court stating that it wanted a mistrial should the court dismiss this juror. But what did I just tell you? The court dismissed the juror and the show must go on. So Diddy's 3rd motion for mistrial is denied. After dismissal of juror number 6, the first alternate came in and took his position. If you'll remember, during our very first Diddy coverage video, I explained that there were 12 jurors and 6 alternates. So what happens now that the juror was dismissed is that one of the 6 alternates comes in and takes that juror's place. And now instead of 6 alternates, there will ultimately be 5. After all that melee, the government ultimately calls their 31st witness, Ananya Sankar. Ananya is a paralegal specialist for the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. And if you're keeping track and asking to yourself, Desiree, isn't that the office where these prosecutors in Diddy's case actually work at? The answer is yes. During her direct examination, Ananya stated that she reviewed the accuracy of government charts and exhibits. She further elaborated that she reviewed hundreds upon hundreds of different documents to include text messages, audio logs, video files, and images. Then, through this witness, the government was able to introduce multiple text messages between KK and another one of Diddy's former assistants named Ryan Lopez. In some of the messages, KK and Ryan were joking about one of Diddy's male escorts being at a hotel lobby. Also through Ananya, The government introduced multiple text messages showing that Diddy and Cassie were planning freak-offs together. Also through Ananya, the government introduced multiple text messages showing that Diddy's staff was actually coordinating freak-offs, hotel nights, king nights, or whatever other new name we're going to discover on behalf of Diddy and for Cassie. The jurors also saw text messages between Diddy's staff members discussing high hotel damage charges. Jurors are also shown text messages of multiple staff members purchasing drugs from different drug dealers on behalf of Diddy. In one specific message, Diddy actually requested 15 Molly pills from his security guards. The jurors also listened to 2 different audio recordings that were recovered on KK's phones of Diddy threatening Jane that he was going to release her sex videos. Do you remember how I said earlier that AUSA Marine Comey informed the court that the government had 5 additional witnesses left, and 3 of those 5 were summary witnesses? Well, Ananya was exactly that. She got up there and she was just able to testify about the different charts, graphs, everything else that the government introduced and verify their accuracy. She works with the government, and that's just really what her testimony is. I don't have any thoughts past that. The cross-examination of Ananya was conducted by Diddy's defense attorney, Teny Geragos. During cross-examination, Teny had Ananya verify that Diddy did send Mia one message, but there were no records of any message sent after that. Teny also pointed Ananya and the jurors to a text message from Jane that stated she was excited to schedule a freak-off and decorate a hotel room for Diddy on Valentine's Day of 2022. Teny also showed jurors a message of Jane resisting pressure to make plans with Diddy. There's really not much to get out of cross-examining a summary witness because all they're doing there is providing a little bit of facts and context. I think Teny did the best she could with this cross-examination. Specifically, she showed messages that kind of showed Jane was a willing participant, which has been the defense's theory this entire time. Aside from that, I don't really have many thoughts on the cross-examination here. Let's see what happens with the next witness. The government next calls their 32nd witness to the stand, DeLeassa Penland. AUSA Emily Johnson does the direct examination on behalf of the government. Much like Ananya, DeLeassa also works for the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and testifies similarly about her review in accuracy, charts, graphing, exhibits, and all of that the government introduced into evidence. At some point during the beginning of DeLeassa's direct examination, the jurors took a lunch break. During the lunch break, the government informed the court that they anticipated DeLeassa's testimony to last through the remainder of today and possibly into tomorrow morning. The government further confirmed that it intended to call another one of Diddy's former personal assistants, a man by the name of Brendan Paul, as its next witness, and it anticipated that Brendan's testimony was going to last through the remainder of the next day. Marc Agnifilo, on behalf of defense, informed the court that defense team had 3 witnesses lined up and ready to go should they start their case on Friday. After the lunch break concluded, DeLeassa resumed the stand to continue her direct examination. During continued direct examination, the jurors saw text messages between Diddy and Cassie arranging different freak-offs. The jurors also saw another text message exchange between Diddy and Cassie, dated 2013, where Cassie asked Diddy if he had any recordings of any sex videos on his phone. To that, Diddy responded, "Nope, not at all." As stated by the prosecution during the lunch hour, DeLeassa's testimony actually did bring us into Diddy's 25th day of trial on Tuesday, June 17th of 2025. But prior to DeLeassa resuming the stand, there was a matter that needed to be addressed. The court took the stand and reprimanded both sides of attorneys because there was a document that was under seal in the case and somehow it got leaked to the general public. When both sides denied any member of their team's involvement in leaking the document, the court responded, "Well, somebody up in here lying, okay?" The court ultimately gave both sides a very strict warning and said, "Please don't let this happen again." After the admonition, AUSA Marine Comey informed the court that on behalf of the government, they actually anticipated resting their case tomorrow, Wednesday, June 18th of 2025. But AUSA Marine Comey also did tell the court that the government's case might spill over into Friday morning, but she just wanted the court to know for timeline purposes. And then, on behalf of defense, Marc Agnifilo informed the court that defense anticipated their case taking about 2 to 5 days. Okay, you would think that we would resume DeLeassa's testimony at this point, but you're wrong. Because after all of that, Brendan Paul, one of Diddy's former personal assistants that the government intends to call, went into court and invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. If you're keeping track like me, Brendan has become the 5th witness in this case to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The prior 4 witnesses who did so are Eddie Garcia, George Kaplan, Jonathan Perez, and Brianna Bunklong. Now, finally, after all of this, the jurors are brought back in and DeLeassa's back on the stand to continue her direct examination. Through DeLeassa, the government introduces records from hotels and flight arrangements that were made for an escort that participated in one of Diddy and Cassie's freak-offs. Jurors also see a credit card bill where Diddy made different arrangements for another escort by the name of Dave. Jurors also see that Diddy's credit card statement was actually paid off using 5 different accounts. Jurors also see text message exchanges between Diddy's staff members discussing the damages that would need to be covered after the 2016 Cassie hotel incident. Much like Ananya, DeLeassa is just a summary witness. She provided some good evidence about stuff that's already been talked about, but she just really confirmed her review of the evidence and the accuracy of it. So I don't really have many opinions on her direct examination, but let's see what happens during cross. Cross-examination of DeLeassa was also conducted by Teny Geragos. During cross-examination, Teny made it her mission to discuss what was actually missing from the different exhibits that DeLeassa said she reviewed. At some point during DeLeassa's cross-examination, the jurors took their lunch break, and after the break, DeLeassa resumed the stand for continued cross-examination. During continued cross-examination, Teny really focused on some different text messages between Cassie and Diddy, trying to paint Cassie as a willing participant as well. After the cross-examination and a brief redirect, the jurors were ultimately dismissed for the day. Much like Ananya's testimony, I don't really have strong feelings about DeLeassa's testimony either. She was a summary witness. She provided her review of the accuracy of the reports and charts and graphs and what have you that the government was introducing into evidence. The cross was fine, the direct was fine, but let's see what happens during the next witness's testimony. As I stated, the jurors were dismissed for that day following DeLeassa's testimony, so trial day 26 picked up on Wednesday, June 18th of 2025. But do you know what happened on this day? There was no testimony. There was no court. Nothing was in session because in an unexpected turn of events, one of the jurors called in sick and the court had to cancel the proceedings. Well, you might be thinking to yourselves and asking me, Desiree, if one of the jurors calls in sick, can't the court just have one of the alternates fill in? And the answer is no. An alternate's job is to fill in should one of the jurors be permanently unavailable. Because a juror has called in sick for one day does not mean that an alternate comes in to listen to the evidence for that one day and take that juror's spot. That's not how it works. So the court ultimately decided that court wouldn't be in session for that Wednesday, and then we would continue on with our very next day of trial. Remember what I said to you, both during the last video and at the beginning of this video. Thursday, June 19th is a federal holiday, so the court wasn't in session that day either. Instead, trial resumed on Friday, June 20th of 2025. With respect to how Wednesday's unexpected court closure will impact the rest of proceedings, I will say this. The government had previously informed the court that it anticipated resting its case in chief today. That's probably not going to happen. Defense had also informed the court that it had 3 witnesses lined up to start today. Again, probably not going to happen. And then also, remember we had the holiday that was scheduled for yesterday, so that's actually 2 days that weren't in session. Lastly, and I don't know why, but court had previously planned for today, this Friday, to be a half day. So trial and testimony would only be in session from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. All that being said, after all of these unexpected delays, let's see what happens on this day. The government then calls their 33rd witness to the stand, Diddy's former personal assistant, Brendan Paul. AUSA Christy Slavik would do the direct examination on behalf of the government. But before we get into what is said during direct examination, remember, before the unexpected court closure, before all the melee and all the delays, Brendan went into court to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And because of that, he is our fifth witness that is currently testifying under the court's immunity order. Brendan stated that he began working as Diddy's personal assistant in late 2022 after his graduation from college. Brendan further stated that he completely stopped working for Diddy on March 25th of 2024 after he got arrested at Miami International Airport. Brendan stated that he was arrested because he had a smidge of cocaine in one of his go-yard bags, but it was a part of his duties as Diddy's personal assistant. Brendan stated that prior to his trip, he was actually sweeping up one of Diddy's rooms, noticed a little baggie of cocaine, put it into his own go-yard, and forgot to take it out prior to the trip. When asked why he didn't tell law enforcement that this was actually Diddy's cocaine, he stated, loyalty. Brendan further stated that he knew from the very beginning that working for Diddy was going to be tumultuous. Brendan stated he worked upwards of 100 hours per week. Brendan stated that throughout his employment with Diddy, he purchased drugs for him about 10 times. Brendan stated he would pay anywhere from $300 to $500 for about 1 to 2 grams of drugs, but on some other occasions, he would pick up drugs that Diddy had already prepaid for. Brendan also stated that about every 2 months he would buy weed for Diddy, and it cost him about $4,200 per 16 ounces. Brendan stated that Diddy's Wild King nights stopped after Cassie filed her lawsuit. Much like some of Diddy's other former personal assistants, Brendan stated that one of his job duties was to help set up those Wild King nights. And again, much like Diddy's other former personal assistants, Brendan stated that after King Nights had concluded, it was part of his job to help clean up as well. In regards to his direct examination testimony, I would have to sit back and think how many other of Diddy's former personal assistants we've heard from so far, but I would say Brendan makes like 3 or 4, maybe even 5. It is astounding to me that all of these former personal assistants are testifying to pretty much the exact same thing. I think Brendan offers the government more cooperation as to the working conditions that the former personal assistants faced when working for Diddy. Remember, one of the predicate offenses for racketeering conspiracy is forced labor. By Brendan stating that he was working 100 hours per week and some of his tasks that he had to do while working for Diddy, the government might be able to convince the jurors that that's one of the qualifying predicate offenses. All that being said, let's see what happens during cross-examination. Cross-examination by Brendan was conducted by none other than one of my favorite defense attorneys on Diddy's legal team, Brian Steele. During cross-examination, Brendan stated that the purchases of drugs was only a small portion of his job for Diddy. Brian also got Brendan to confess that working for Diddy was good for the most part. As far as my opinions on cross-examination, you guys know how I feel about Brian. I think for the most part, he comes in, he gets to the point, he gets the information that he needs to get out of these witnesses, and he moves on. And I think Brendan's cross-examination was no different. I think Brian did a really good job. He kept it brief, he kept it to the point, and he got out the details that he needed to get out of Brendan. After cross-examination had concluded, the government called their 34th witness to the stand, Joseph Cerciello. Joseph is an HSI agent who was called on behalf of the government to review more records and their accuracy. After asking some preliminary questions during direct examination, Joseph's testimony actually was going to continue the following Monday, and the jurors were dismissed for the day. After the jurors were dismissed for the day, the government informed the court that Joseph's testimony was likely to last the entirety of that following Monday. The government stated it had questions for Joseph that would continue through the lunch hour, and that defense would likely question him throughout the remainder of that day. Marc Agnifilo, on behalf of defense, informed the court that defense team probably anticipated resting either Tuesday, June 24th or Wednesday, June 25th. But as we experienced this week, remember that things can always change. If everything goes as scheduled, and depending on the length of closing argument on behalf of both sides, Diddy's case might actually conclude next week. Next week, we'll continue on in our coverage with what will hopefully be the final week of Diddy's trial. As always, Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, y'all take care.